All right, we are here today at the Veterans Growing America building where CSU is sponsoring a military author takeover. And so we are excited to have with us today Miss Wonda Grayson. Everybody, please give her a round of applause. Thank you for joining us. And she is going to be talking about her book that's entitled The Caregiver Advocacy Guide. And so, with this particular book, most people don't know how to navigate the healthcare system. And so, until they're forced to do so. And so, this is what she's going to be talking to us about. This guide aims to change that, to educate individuals of how to navigate the healthcare system, knowing what you have available to you. And so, that's what we're going to talk about this on today. But before we do that, who is Wanda? Talk to us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wonda Grayson. I'm from South Carolina.
Everybody's from South Carolina.
Yeah, that's the best place to be from. I'm a mother of one. My son is 29. Grew up on essentially not a farm, but it was a farm. We had a lot of land, and that's important because it actually comes up in the book. But essentially, grew up on organic food before we knew what organic food was, because my father grew everything that we ate except the meats.
Oh, wow.
To include the fruits, all the vegetables. You know, we were talking about it the other day. Right, we had sugarcane stalks, we had lettuce, we had cabbage, we had the different color watermelons. You know, there's a yellow and a red.
There is.
Yeah, we had scaponines, we had strawberries. I was telling somebody the other day, I used to, we had this huge pear tree in our backyard, and the pears would be about this big. And this was, 1984, 1985. And I just happened to take one to school one day, and I was sharing it with some people, and I ended up selling the pears to get my money. So my dad was like, well, why don't you ask for money anymore? I was like, I got to hustle. So I would just go outside, get the pears. I would take my orders, get the pears, take them to school.
Early entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with this particular book, it's really a practical guide helping caregivers navigate hospital discharge planning, Medicare and Medicaid, different gaps, advocacy, medical directives, and crisis preparation before something critical, or for families that are facing something critical with their family members. So tell us what inspired this guy? Like there you were, and then
there I was, getting dressed to do nothing because I'm retired, and I got a text from my brother that said the ambulance is at the house. You need to call and see what's happening in South Carolina. He had cameras on the house, and so he wasn't home, but he could see what was happening. So I called my sister, and I said, okay, what's going on? And she said, well, I think Mama's having a stroke, but I'll call you back. So as it turned out, my mother had a massive stroke that 81 left her paralyzed on her left side. And for all the things that the military teach you, for all the things that our education teaches you, because I feel like I'm a fairly intelligent person. I've got several degrees, graduated with honors, worked in the military for 9 years, Army, of course. 26 years in the federal government, 14 of the 26 was spent as a GS-15. Didn't want to go SES because I wanted to be a mom, so I did that when my son was in the 8th grade or the 6th grade. And so between the 6th grade and college, that was 11 years that I could just be mom. And so by the time SES came about, I was like, I'm 3 years from retiring. I'm not doing that. Yeah. But so for all the responsibilities I've held and I had, my mother having a stroke was probably the most educational thing that happened in my life. Because for all that we live in this DMV and we work to acquire and all this wealth that we are building and trying to leave to our kids, where the farm that I grew up on comes into play, is that I realized in the middle of my crisis that in order for my mother to get help from the Medicaid system, we either had to sell everything, or if we didn't sell it, my brother, my sister, and I would ended up having to buy back land that we already own outright. Because my mother, that's how Medicaid works. You know, if they help you in the long-term care system, once you turn 55 in New York, it's anything they do for you. But most states, once you turn 55, if they provide any long-term care for you when you die, your estate has to pay it back. So I couldn't quite fathom, in the middle of me grieving, the state of South Carolina was really going to send me a bill in the middle of me grieving. A system that I've been paying into my entire professional life. And it was my father, my mother, and I had 4 siblings. So it's 7 of us. And 2 of my brothers are deceased, and my father's deceased, and now my mother's deceased. But at the time, I was like, so 7 people have paid into a system, and because one of us need help, 3 of them won't ever ask for help. Because one of us needs help, 3 of us got to pay a bill to own something we already own. So we got to buy the same land twice. And my brother looked at me and said, you have to do something with this. You got a platform. You need to use it and tell people. And I'm looking at him thinking, I don't have a platform. I'm going through the same crisis you're going through. But I left home 40 years ago, my military career. And so when I went back home to care for my mother, I spent 40 days in the hospital, somewhere sleeping between a chair and a couch, because I slept where she slept. And my routine was to get up every morning and wash her face with a warm cloth. And my mother looked at me quietly and said, you like helping people, don't you? And I said, yes, I do. And that was all she said. And so in the midst of that, I just felt like, between my brother telling me I got to tell people and my mother letting me know that she recognized that my calling was to help people, I wrote the book, because all I could think to myself was, people can't know this. There's no way I didn't know that if my mom got sick, I ultimately would get a bill.
Yeah. So do you think that's what surprises families the most, or is there something else that you would say surprises individuals the most when it comes to this type of crisis?
Most people don't know this. You don't know this until you're standing in the middle of it. I saw the reaction. I heard the groans when I said what my story was. People don't know this. You don't know that what most of the things in the healthcare system mean, because we think we're outdated. Our knowledge is so antiquated. Some of the conversations we were having, so in terms of surprises, there were all kinds of surprises. For instance, the terminology is very different. You know, again, for all my degrees, somebody said to me medically stable, and I'm like, my mother just had a major stroke, and you said she's medically stable, and then I got excited because I'm like, okay, but medically stable does not mean stable. It just means you no longer need the acute level of care that the hospital gives you. Doesn't mean heal. It doesn't mean ready to really be at home, but it does mean you're going home. And so surprises, like I shared on the call, I wrote this in a night because I couldn't sleep. I hadn't slept in 3 days. My mind was so overloaded with information just from dealing with the hospital and the emotions and my mom and trying to figure it out. I couldn't even hear anymore. I couldn't process not another word. And so just one night in my hotel, I was like, I got to get this out. So I just started writing. But what this is not my story. I moved beyond the story. It was all the confusion that I was living. It's a dictionary, because there's a chapter in here on medical terminology. It's a chapter on what questions to ask. It's a chapter on, here's what the systems are that you deal with. If the nurse or the doctor says this, here's the system it activates. It's a guide on understanding what an advanced medical directive does. Even if you don't officially get it notarized, you can at least go through it with your loved one, because that was some of our challenge. You know, where we're outdated is, my mother had a feeding tube, which is temporary. And my sister immediately looked at me and said, Mama says she don't want to live on a tube. And so I had to ask, did she mean feeding tube or breathing tube? Because those are the things we don't even stop to clarify. We don't stop to think to clarify that. So we got past the feeding tube, and then it was, when we think about, mama has a DNR, she doesn't want to be resuscitated. And I'm looking at my sister and I'm like, okay, but she had a massive stroke and her vitals have been good ever since. There's nothing wrong with her heart rate. There's nothing wrong with her oxygen. There's nothing wrong with her vitals. So the DNR only works if her heart stops. So then it was, well, my brother was like, I don't like seeing her like this. I want to make sure she's not on life support. Well, when we think about life support, most people think about life support as a machine. Our life support came in an IV bag. So we're so outdated, and because we won't communicate with each other, because especially in the Black culture, we're so afraid that if we have a conversation that talks about mortality, then somebody's going to become mortal. Well, at the end of the day, you don't have to talk about mortality for somebody to have a fatality. I mean, my mother had a stroke and lived. So we were dealing with this crisis in the middle of her fighting to recover. So the surprise that I think most people find is that we don't know anything about the new healthcare system that we're paying into. That's not going to be there for those of us that are trying to not live on the system because it wasn't designed to help us.
So what would you say to the families that say, well, my parents are healthy, or the folks that I'm, may be responsible for, everything's all good. Everything's a perfect world right now. What would you say that they need to educate themselves about?
At first, that's a lie you need to stop telling yourself. My mother was healthy. My mother asked my niece, bring me some orange juice. That was a 5-minute, whatever my niece was doing. She went to the kitchen. She came back with the orange juice and looked at my mom and said, Granny, you don't look right. 5 minutes. My sister said, well, it can't be a stroke because I just talked to her an hour ago. So the misnomer is that they're healthy until they're not. And that's the problem. We need to stop waiting until they're not shows up. Because when I tell you I'm standing in the middle of the hospital and I'm looking at the lady, and every day I tell myself, there's no way today is going to be worse than yesterday. And every day was worse than yesterday, to the point to where I just couldn't process any more information. Right down to the best surprise, the best kept secret in the medical system is CFR 42, section 482.43. That is the law that governs hospital discharges that none of us knows exist, that nurses don't even know exist, because I ended up telling the caseworker supervisor and the head nurse about it when they tried to discharge my mother with a 24-hour notice. Now, they got us like that twice. The first time the call came, I'm like, ma'am, you called the wrong daughter. I'm standing in Virginia. My mother's in South Carolina. The lady said, well, I called the person that I called everybody and you answered the phone. So all I'm telling you is that your mom is being discharged tomorrow and somebody needs to be there to receive her and the equipment. Okay. Well, I'm calling my sister and my brother and my nieces, and I'm like, this is the call I got. I don't know what to do with this. But that was the first time. But when you're in the middle of your crisis, you are so overloaded that you can't process. And for the blessings of the career that I've had, where I've been in senior level positions and I've done great things in my career, I couldn't think my way through that crisis to save my soul because I had no capacity. But as God would have it, I had to come home for something. And he laid me on my back for 3 weeks with bronchitis. I don't even know how I caught bronchitis, but I couldn't get out the bed for 3 weeks. But it was in that level of clarity that I just started looking and researching and doing what I did. And I found CFR 42, section 482.43. So the next time I got notification from the hospital that says, well, your mom's going to be discharged tomorrow, I simply wrote an email that said, I'm not opposed to the discharge and I'm ready for that. But here are the 19 things I need in place before she goes home tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
That email is also in that book as your template, because what turned into going home tomorrow occurred 7 days later. And when I had the conversation with the head nurse and the case manager supervisor, I had to ask them, why exactly are we having this meeting? What did I ask you for that my mother and my family is not legally entitled to? And the answer was nothing. They just didn't realize I knew what they didn't know. And so at this point, like I told them, well, now that I'm offended, can y'all go ahead and just get my mom prepped, and can we just go ahead and take her home, but under the right conditions? And this is why it's called the Caregiver Advocacy Guide, because you have to advocate from a place that you probably never thought you were going to have to advocate from. You got to first stop and think, because the one thing I wasn't worried about, I didn't need Medicare. I didn't know anything about Medicare. I'm not eligible for Medicare. I still got 6 years before I get to Medicare. It never dawned on me that my mother was on Medicare. And I needed to understand that system for no other reason to advocate for her. So in the midst of my crisis, and I do a segment on Black Fredericksburg Radio called Before the Crisis, and that segment was born from my crisis, because I don't want any other family to go through what we were going through during our crisis.
No, that's I'm telling you, I'm over here like, I mean, I think everybody can relate to that as parents age. And another thing, even it doesn't have to be aging parents.
Exactly.
And that's another thing, because I didn't realize, I have a first cousin who's, been in long-term care. He's in his 30s for the last 10 years because of, and his mom, my aunt, passed away. So, he's, but, when I was thinking about with your story, and I'm probably going to like send every family member that, like, we've been, my family has been in the same situation for the last 2 years now. My mom was 80 years old, has never been in the hospital her whole life. Like, drives every day, lives by herself, walked out the bed, stumbled on the sheet, and cracked her skull. And the last 2 years of my sister and I trying to understand how to take care of her with the hospital, the same thing. She got I live in Maryland. They call one day and like they're sending her home.
Yeah.
And we have to, so everything you were saying was so resonating to a point that, and I still don't know a lot. And like you said, and I'm from South Carolina, a small town, and a lot of my family is looking to me in Maryland to be the you're educated, you have to know more than us. And I'm like, I'm a TRICARE baby. Right. I've been on TRICARE for 30 years. The military has taught us not to ask a lot of questions. You show up and you get care and go home. And which really, really changed my mentality of, I can't be that. So back to the previous author, AI has been a lot of my friend lately, looking up different terminology, looking up things, looking up rights of, when they cut off her physical therapy when she still needed it. So what you're doing is so needed. And we thought my mom we joked about it. She's 80, she's around here doing her thing. We never thought about when she is not doing those things.
Absolutely.
So I resonated so much with me what you were saying. I wanted to acknowledge that, because that last question we have here is like, what do you believe gives families the most hope with understanding this topic? Like, where's that, what is your goal in giving families by passing this very personal thing on to them?
And when you answer that, also tell us where we can find this book and purchase it, because my dad is one of those that I feel like is in good health until he won't be. So as you answer that question, tell us how we can find you. And
So preparation is key.
Yeah.
And I can say communicate, but you have to communicate for real.
Yeah.
That's talking about all the emotional things. Who is supposed to speak for you if you can't speak for yourself? Who has the authority to make the decisions? Who is the right person to make the decision? Because proximity does not make you the best person. It truly has to be somebody that's strong enough to process all of the emotions that's dealing with the situation of the family member, as well as the emotions of the person that you can't even help. All you can do is just try to work through whatever they're dealing with. because when I tell you probably the greatest lesson I learned in this, you cannot rise to the demands of a crisis. You simply fall to your level of preparation. Mm. And if you are not prepared, then you are investigating, searching, falling apart, trying to hold other people up and trying to love somebody through something at the same time. And it's taxing. It will take you out. You can't hear. You don't know what to ask. You don't think to ask about the simplest of things. And that's so important because one Band-Aid almost cost us $2,000 a month. One Band-Aid. One style of Band-Aid, because we didn't know to ask when my mother goes home, how does Medicare provide supplies? Who provides the supplies for her? We didn't think to ask something that simple. So, and again, all of that is in this guide. So you can find it on my website, WondaGrayson.com. It's on Amazon as well. And you can find me at Grayson Financials on Instagram.
Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Wonda Grayson.
I want to thank you. I didn't know that it was going to be what, man, you like touched